Hello and welcome to the ACE Live Webinar Series. I'm your host, Araceli DeLeon, and I'm the Product Development Content and Education Manager here at ACE. Thank you for joining us today for today's presentation, today's webinar. We are so excited for you to join us. Please let us know where you're joining us from in that live chat. I will be monitoring that chat throughout the day. But before we get started and meet today's presenter, let's jump into some quick announcements. By popular demand, the ACE Gear Store has gone live. In order for you to check out the ACE Gear Store, go into your My ACE account, and there's a quick graphic there, quick link for you to go check that out today. Along with the ACE Gear Store, we have some free resources available to you, such as the ACE Job Board, the ACE Pro Compass, and the ACE Plus Wix website builder. So be sure to check those other three resources out that are free for you, our ACE professionals. Another announcement here, sign up to earn a $50 gift card when you refer a friend and a fitness enthusiast like yourself. You get rewarded when they purchase an ACE certification study program. As a gift from you, they'll earn a 10% off. It's a win-win for each of you. All right, and just some quick housekeeping for today. You are joining free via YouTube today. This 1-hour free webinar is part of a 2-hour course. So those 0.2 CECs can be earned once you purchase the course that will be available on June 25th. You will get an email with some instructions on how to purchase the course. Once you purchase the course, that course will appear in your My ACE account. After you pass the 10-question quiz, those 0.2 CECs will be awarded to your My ACE. So again, today's 1-hour session is live here and free via YouTube. In order for you to be able to participate in the chat bar, just a reminder, you do need to log in with your Google account. Otherwise, you can just view the chat bar. I will be monitoring that chat for questions for our presenter, and we'll be answering those at the end of today's session. So again, just to recap, you are watching today for free. The 2-hour course will launch on June 25th, and in order to earn those CECs, you do need to purchase the 0.2 course when that becomes live. So be sure to ask those questions. Let us know if you have any additional questions for our presenter. You can rewind, fast forward, and with that, you will also get a recording of today's presentation. All right, let's get started. Up next, you'll be hearing from our presenter, Dr. Jan Schroeder.
Welcome to the Longevity Focus Program Design. My name is Dr. Jan Schroeder, and I am a professor of kinesiology at Long Beach State University. My PhD is in exercise physiology with a special emphasis in gerontology. I have been working with older adults for over 30 years, and I still currently teach 4 group exercise classes per week through my company, Garage Girls Fitness, specializing in the older adult. So with today, our learning objectives include, by the end of the session, you should be able to explain the key principles of longevity-focused training and how they apply to program designs for aging clients. You should also be able to apply science-backed tools, templates, and strategies to develop training programs that support the 4 pillars of longevity, which are strength, power, mobility, and recovery. And then finally, you should be able to identify common mistakes and challenges in longevity training and evaluate best practices for improving client outcomes. Now, there is a growing need for longevity-focused training. But before we get into that, what I would like to do is actually define longevity. And longevity in its strictest terms or its strictest definition simply means the length of your lifetime. However, in the wellness space, we have expanded this definition to include health span. So longevity focused training for us, or longevity for us in our space, is the period of life spent in good health. Now, I am sure you are aware of all the statistics of our aging population, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to point out two different things. One is by 2030, so just in 5 years, all baby boomers will be 65 years or older. That is a very large percentage of our population. And then the other statistic is that within 10 years, the longevity market industry is expected to grow to $63 billion. So what we have is we have an aging population. More people are living longer, and they want to stay healthy, so they are spending their money on products and services within the longevity market in order to maintain their independence and good health. So that provides an opportunity for us as the fitness professional to master longevity training, because it will assist us with gaining a competitive edge in the longevity market industry. It will also expand our client base, and it will position us as specialists. So let's go ahead and get started. The pillars of longevity training, what do they include? Well, that's a really hard question to answer. And the reason for it is because everyone defines longevity different, or the pillars within longevity differently. If we were to look into the literature and look at all the different pillars that are discussed, we would need to focus on like 30 different things within our longevity-focused training programs. So for today, we're going to focus on 4. We're going to focus on strength, power, mobility, and recovery. So over the next 2 hours, we're going to talk about what makes these a pillar and then how to scientifically train them. So let's start with strength. As I'm sure you're aware, as we grow older, our strength declines. I want to mention 2 really important issues within that decline. One is that strength declines faster in the lower body than it does the upper body. So why does that matter? Well, most of our activities of daily living relate more to the lower body, having strength in the lower body. So getting up out of a chair, toileting, squatting down to garden, all of these things require lower body strength, and that declines quicker than upper body strength. The other thing I want to mention is that we see a more rapid decline in the type 2BX fibers compared to type 1 muscle fibers. And if you'll remember, type 2BX muscle fibers, these are responsible for your forceful contractions, your rapid contractions, where type 1 fibers, they are responsible for more endurance type movements or like posture. So again, why does that matter? Well, as we just said, your activities of daily living require strength. And if we lose those muscle fibers that provide us with the proper contraction type to perform the activity of daily living, then we are less likely to be able to live independently. I am also sure that you are aware of the benefits of resistance training. But I picked out a few of the benefits that are really critical for the older adult. So one of the first benefits of resistance training for the older adult is that we see less sarcopenia in individuals who resistance train. Sarcopenia simply means a loss of muscle mass. So if we have somebody who is strength training, they will lose less muscle mass as they grow older. We see a reduction in the number of falls and fall-related injuries in individuals who resistance train. We see improvements in strength if our program design is appropriate. We see improvements in bone density with resistance training. Improvements in balance occur. Improvements in our mental health. So research has shown that resistance training reduces stress as well as promotes psychological resiliency in the older adult. Now, it also improves the ability to perform activities of daily living, which is actually the foundation of longevity-focused training, so super important one. It also helps to promote autophagy. Autophagy is the process in the body where it gets rid of older or damaged cells and replaces them with newer and healthier cells. And then finally, resistance training helps to regulate our blood sugar levels and to improve our insulin sensitivity. How do we program strength? Well, a general recommendation is for a frequency of a minimum of 2 days per week per body part. Our repetition range is going to depend upon our client. If our client is beginning, just starting out a program, or they're frail, we'll put them in the 10 to 15 repetition range. Whereas if our client has been working out with us for a while, or they're more experienced or more fit, then we can put them in the 8 to 12 repetition range. We can also look at our sets. We only need 1 set for individuals who are frail or just starting out. That is enough to promote those benefits. And then as they become more skilled and more confident, then we can start to add in 2, 3, 4 sets. And then finally, exercises about 8 to 10 to incorporate all the major muscle groups. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you with just this general exercise design. We'll get more into the types of exercises that we should be doing as we move through our session. So let's move on to the pillar of power. With power, remember, it's our explosive strength. So it is force times velocity. It is an extremely strong predictor of our functional performance, meaning that most of our activities of daily living incorporate power. So, for example, getting up from a chair, that's an actual power move. Moving your foot from the accelerator to the brake in your car, that is a power move. The ability to walk across a busy street quickly, that is a power move. So power is extremely important for us to train with longevity-focused programs. Now, unfortunately, as we age, power declines. Why is that? Well, we see that sarcopenia. In other words, people experience a decrease in muscle mass, that decreases our power. We see an atrophy of the type 2B X fibers. Again, remember, those are those strong contractions, rapid contractions. That is what we need for power. When we lose them, our power declines. We also see a reduced muscle unit activation. And all that means is the time it takes for the brain to get the signal down to the muscle to contract rapidly, that is slowed or impaired. And then finally, with power, we lose power quicker than we lose strength because of all these reasons that we just talked about. But when we lose that power, we lose the ability to stay living independently. So how do we train for power? Well, again, I want to emphasize that it is a very strong predictor of functional performance, so we need to include it in our programming. But the general recommendation is to use varying loads or varying intensities at varying speeds. Older adults can benefit from both high velocity power training and low velocity power training because we need both for the activities of daily living. And once again, we'll get more into this as we progress through our session. Next up, pillar of mobility. Now, a lot of people confuse flexibility and mobility, but mobility is so much more than just flexibility. It is determined by muscular strength, it's determined by your flexibility, by joint health. So for example, if you have a knee replacement, you might not have the mobility anymore in that knee. It might have declined. Your motor control, your proprioception, or your body awareness helps to determine your mobility. And of course, agility. All of these factors determine your mobility. Now, the easiest definition I can give you for mobility is it is your ability to move purposefully during your day. Now, with mobility, as we grow older, it declines. And it is reported that 33% to 50% of older adults age 65 and up have some sort of difficulties related to walking or climbing the stairs. That is a huge percentage of our population to report having difficulties walking or stair climbing, especially since those are critical activities of daily living. So with the loss of mobility, not only does it affect us with the ability to perform activities of daily living, but it also, for those who have lost mobility, they are less likely to remain in the community, meaning they are more likely to live in assisted living and or skilled nursing. Individuals who have lost mobility also exhibit higher rates of disease. They report a poorer quality of life, and they also report greater likelihood of social isolation. So how do we train mobility? Well, the wonderful thing about mobility is that it can be trained through a wide variety of different modalities. Flexibility exercises, resistance exercises, stability exercises, dynamic range of motion, recovery techniques such as foam rolling. All of these help to improve mobility. And once again, we'll get into that a little bit more as we move through today. Our last pillar that we're going to discuss is the pillar of recovery. Now, recovery is somewhat new to our industry. So let's spend a little time talking about what recovery is and how do we incorporate it into our training programs. So with recovery, before I talk about what it means, I really want to throw out this disclaimer that there is a lack of research in the area of recovery, especially for older adults and females. Most of the research studies are focused on the population of young male athletes working on recovering during their competitive season. So what we find from those studies may or may not apply to the older adult and to females. So this gap in the research makes it a little more challenging for us as fitness professionals to use evidence-based strategies to promote recovery for our aging clients. Now, that being said, what is recovery? In its simplest terms, it is the amount of time it takes for an individual to recover or for fatigue and exercise-induced muscle damage to dissipate after their workout so that they can work out again. Now, a more scientific definition is it is the process of resolving physiological as well as psychological disturbances due to unaccustomed or intense exercise. So with recovery, we all know the benefits of exercise and how wonderful it is, but there are some short-term, not so fun side effects to exercise as well, especially unaccustomed or high intensity. And the biggest one tends to be exercise-induced muscle damage. And with exercise-induced muscle damage, it is characterized by muscle soreness, loss of function, a reduced exercise capacity, reduced force production. It can affect your limb positioning into your circumference, where it's hard to straighten out your arms after doing a bicep session. And we also see an increase in creatine kinase and myoglobin, which are blood markers for the amount of exercise-induced muscle damage. Now, if we look at these factors for a younger adult, these are temporary. These are not a great, it's not a big deal. But when we look at exercise-induced muscle damage for the older adult, we do have some concerns. An older adult already has a decline in function. And if they're experiencing exercise-induced muscle damage from an exercise session, we are going to see that they may have a loss of function temporarily, but that loss of function, getting them to get up the stairs to their bedroom, may be more challenging for them. Or it may affect their ability to recover from a fall because they have a loss of function, a loss of force production. So while we want to make our exercise design appropriate in order to stimulate growth and improve their activities of daily living, we have to be careful as to the amount of exercise-induced muscle damage that we inflict upon our clients. So with the exercise-induced muscle damage, it can vary in the magnitude or the intensity of the symptoms, and it can vary in the duration of the symptoms. So why? Why are there differences? Well, the first one is related to training intensity. The higher the intensity, the greater the exercise-induced muscle damage. The muscles used. So if you are doing a lower body session, the intensity of the soreness and loss of function is going to be in the lower body as compared to the upper body because you didn't do anything up there. The contraction type, eccentric contractions, are known to produce more delayed onset of muscle soreness than concentric contractions. Your training status, are you a beginner? You're going to experience more exercise-induced damage as compared to somebody who's more experienced. Your sleep quality, your nutrition status, your gender, and your age, possibly. So let's talk about the age issue with this. So once again, I want to reiterate that we need to be very careful in the conclusions that we draw because there's a limited number of studies in this area, especially with the older adult. But we recently have had two meta-analyses come out, one in 2024, and the researchers looked at all this research in relationship to exercise-induced muscle damage in the aging muscle compared to the younger muscle. And what the researchers concluded was that aged muscle or older muscle, it displays delayed, prolonged, and inefficient recovery. So it takes longer for the recovery process to get started. The recovery process itself takes longer, and the recovery process may not be complete. It might be inefficient. Now, why? What did they say is causing this? A few things. One is anabolic resistance. As we grow older, our bodies start to resist anabolic processes. So keep in mind, in your body, we have catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism breaks things down, anabolism builds things up. So when you create exercise-induced muscle damage, that's the breakdown. So the anabolic processes then is the buildup. But as we grow older, our bodies are resistant to rebuilding and repairing. It will do it. It just might not be as efficient as it was when we were younger. Another thing that happens that can cause this phenomenon is a stiffening of the extracellular matrix. And the ECM is really a structural network that surrounds our cells and helps the cells to communicate with each other. When it starts to stiffen as we age, it is a natural part of the aging process, then the communication between cells is not as great. And that can delay or prolonged repair and regeneration. We also see that as we grow older, our mitochondria start to dysfunction. And that once again delays or prolongs repair and recovery. We see unresolved inflammation. As we grow older, we start to develop this chronic low-grade inflammation in the body. It's called inflammaging. And that inflammation, it will delay or prolong or create inefficient recovery and repair and regeneration as well. And then finally, they suggest that there are alterations in our satellite cell function, and satellite cells are critical for repair and regeneration. And as we grow older, there's alterations in those satellite cells, which then again creates delayed, prolonged, and inefficient recovery. All right, so that being said, then we had another meta-analysis come out just this year. And these researchers also looked at the research of young muscle compared to aged muscle and the ability to recover from exercise-induced muscle damage. And they found the exact opposite of what the 2024 meta-analysis showed. They found that aged muscle experiences 34% less muscle soreness at 48 hours and 62% less muscle soreness at 72 hours when compared to a younger muscle. Fantastic. That means maybe that there's no issues with this delayed, prolonged, and inefficient recovery. But here's where you need to be careful with the research. That research headline of aged muscle is it's A-okay with recovery was plastered everywhere. But once you look into the actual research, you might think again. The researchers, what they did is they compared young muscle, 18 to 25-year-olds, and they compared it to aged muscle. But their definition of aged muscle was age 36. If I look at my 36-year-old client compared to my 76-year-old client, there is a definite difference in recovery, in my opinion. All right. So with that, this just is to make you understand that the research is not quite where we need it yet to be able to develop evidence-based strategies on active recovery, recovery techniques, and things such as sleep and nutrition and all of that. We don't know enough quite yet. So we have to be just a little bit careful on our strategies. All right. Question becomes, how much recovery is needed for our clients? Well, that is really dependent upon the client. Age can be a factor, possibly, we don't know yet, but I really do want to point out here that age really isn't the whole story, because you can have a well-trained 65-year-old who has excellent nutrition and sleep habits and low stress. They're going to recover better than a 35-year-old stressed out mom who is not sleeping and her eating habits may not be the best right now. So age is a factor, but it's not a limitation. The intensity of your session definitely will determine how much recovery you need. So if you have a high intensity session, let's say resistance training, high intensity resistance training. Your client might need 48 hours to recover, 72, maybe 96 hours. The more intense it is, the more recovery time they're going to need. But if they're doing some mobility flows or maybe some, aqua aerobics or walking where the intensity is much lower, they might be able to do those on a daily basis and need very little recovery time until the next session. Training experience comes into play. So somebody who is just beginning, they are going to experience more exercise-induced muscle damage and more symptoms and longer duration than somebody who is more experienced. The beginner their body is not accustomed to that repair and regeneration, so it's just going to take a little longer. Whereas the experienced individual, their bodies already know, oh, this is something new or it's high intensity. I know what I have to do in order to repair and regenerate. Now, that being said, experience does not negate proper recovery time. Everybody needs recovery time, all right, because that's where the magic happens. Your sleep, your nutrition, and your stress status all affect how much recovery you need. Sleep is really where it happens. This is where the body is repairing and regenerating. Your nutrition, you need protein for tissue repair. You need carbohydrates to replenish your glycogen stores. You need healthy fats to support your hormonal balance. And then, of course, stress. If you are under chronic stress, then your cortisol level goes up, which can increase inflammation, which can then decrease repair and recovery. Your client's health status, their current and chronic health status plays into recovery. So if they have arthritis or diabetes or maybe an autoimmune issue, that all can increase inflammation within the body, which then delays the repair and recovery process. But maybe they have a localized injury. So maybe it's a hip replacement or a shoulder arthritis. That particular joint may need more recovery than another joint. So it can be localized recovery as well. And then finally, medication can also affect recovery because it can affect hydration status, it can affect nutrition, and just it can cause inflammation sometimes. So it can all delay the repair and regeneration process. All right, are you ready to start putting it all together? So with building an effective longevity-focused program, we need three things. One is we need to complete assessments, we need the proper program design, and then we need to know when to safely progress our clients. Let's start with assessment. So with assessment, it really is the foundation for safe and targeted progress. We need to understand where our clients are right now. We can do that through a health history and exercise readiness questionnaire. So we can gather information about, their past injuries, but what are they currently experiencing? What are their health concerns? And when we do that, it allows us to design a program to not aggravate their current conditions. Right? But it also shows the client that you have their best interest at heart. We also want to work on developing the client's goals. Where do they want to be short term? So maybe a few weeks from now or maybe a month. What is that first goal? And then we also want to discuss with them their long-term goal or their long-term vision for maintaining physical independence and improving their health. We want to make sure that we listen to the clients and what their goals are, and then program accordingly. And then finally, in this phase, we want to do fitness assessments. And we can assess their fitness levels in lot of different ways we can assess balance and flexibility and strength and power and cardiovascular endurance and their blood pressure and their nutrition and their sleep status. We can do a lot. However, I want to just say more is not better. When we do a lot of assessments, it can be overwhelming to the older adult. It can be intimidating to them, and it can be discouraging. The other thing is if we do a lot of them all at once, fatigue can set in for the older adult, and then that can affect the accuracy of the results. So focusing on just enough assessment to get you the information that you need to design a program to meet their goals. That is where we're headed towards. Now, one other thing about fitness assessments is that keep in mind observation and communication are really great informal assessment tools, because what they're feeling and how they're moving at that particular moment can give you actually more information than a possible formal test. All right. The other thing I want to mention about assessments is that it is an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time, here it is, and we're done. As our clients are becoming more skilled, as they're becoming more confident, we want to reassess them on their on whatever a test that we have given them prior. The reason for it is because it, one, allows us to know if they're ready for a progression. It also allows us to celebrate the win, meaning that any progress, whether it is an improvement in an assessment score or improvement in movement quality, we want to celebrate those wins. So reassess as necessary. All right, so once we're done collecting the information on our health history, the client's goals, our assessments, then we can work on program design. With program design, it is really an integration of strength, power, mobility, and recovery. How do we integrate them together? Because we have to remember that the pillars support other pillars, meaning you have to have a strength base before you can do power exercises. Right? Recovery is going to support strength, power, and mobility. They support each other. So the art of program design comes in sequencing our pillars to complement each other, not compete with each other. And in our second hour, we're really going to look at that more closely. All right. The last thing that we're doing with our longevity-focused training programs is we need to progress our exercises safely. This cannot be done arbitrarily. It needs to be done in a systematic way. That way, we are guaranteed the best chance of success with our progression. It helps to build the client's confidence level, and it promotes safety. So let's talk about general exercise progression. Prior to progressing any exercise that you have your client doing, we have to ensure that they have mastery at that current level. So how do we determine that? Well, there are indicators of readiness for mastery. One of them is form consistency. Are they able to perform the exercise with good form, good technique each time? Neuromuscular control. Are they confident in their movement pattern, meaning it's smooth and deliberate? That means they have control. If they are kind of shaky or they're hesitant or you sense some discomfort, that is not neuromuscular control. They're not ready to progress that exercise yet. So that brings us to confidence and comfort. Your client needs to be confident in their current ability to perform that exercise prior to moving on. If they don't show confidence, then they're not ready to move on. All right. Stability under load. This only pertains to some types of exercise. So let's take resistance training. Are they able to complete the exercise with form consistency, neuromuscular control, confidence, with weight on the bar, say. All right? Can they maintain their stability under load? And then finally, the last thing that we look for when we're looking at mastery is endurance in execution, meaning, can they exhibit form consistency, neuromuscular control, confidence, stability under load for the intended volume that you've set for them, for the number of reps and sets that you have set for them? Can they exhibit all the indicators of readiness? If they can, then they're ready to progress. But if they can't, they can do it for a few of the reps and a few of the sets, but not all, they're not ready yet. All right, so with this, what variables should we progress? Well, there's a lot of different things that you can progress. An easy one is progressing the load. We can put more weight on the bar, more intensity on the bar. We can make these small, manageable increases in weight. Repetitions can be changed. So maybe they're in that 10 to 15 range, and so they're doing well at 10. Great, we're going to increase the repetitions to 12. That is a progression. Sets, we can progress, as we talked about earlier, from 1 set up to 2, 3, 4 sets, whatever's comfortable for them. Rest time. So we can change this as a progression, so we can decrease the rest time between sets to maybe increase the cardiovascular load, or a progression is actually even to increase the recovery time between sessions in order to give them recovery, time enough to recover so that they can come back stronger. Tempo can change. We can speed up the movement, we can slow the movement down, we can hold a movement. The tempo is a progression. Range of motion. We can deepen a hamstring stretch in order to progress the exercise. Or maybe we increase the range of motion with a squat. That is a progression. And then finally, we can progress complexity. And with complexity, what that means is, I'll give you some examples. One, we can go from machine weights to free weights. That's increasing the complexity of the exercise. Machines are fantastic for beginners, for individuals who are frail, for individuals who are recovering from an injury, because that machine guides them through the proper movement pattern. But we can progress the client with complexity to a body weight movement, and then finally to using free weights to increasing the load on it. We can also introduce more complexity and progress the exercise by moving from a stable surface to an unstable surface. So let's say I'm doing a balance pose, one-legged balance pose, and I'm on hardwood floor. I can progress that to an unstable surface, to a folded over yoga mat or maybe an Airex pad. And that increases the complexity of creating more core engagement, more coordination, more stability that is needed. So that's a way to introduce complexity. And then we can also go from a bilateral movement to a unilateral movement. So let's take, for example, we're working with our client on a bent over row with dumbbells. Both hands are moving. We are doing the same thing with both sides of the body. That is helping us to promote symmetry, and it's helping us to improve our strength. But we can introduce more complexity by making it a unilateral movement, so a one-armed row. This increases the complexity by challenging our core engagement, our stability, our coordination. Now, again, we don't move to a more complex movement until they've shown mastery at the current level. All righty, so with progression, we want to focus on changing one variable at a time, just one. definite reasons for this. One reason is because it helps us to identify what's working. In other words, if we are progressing a client and we progress the load, the sets, and the tempo of the exercise, we don't know which one of those, or is it the combination, that is promoting the growth within our client. So doing just one thing allows us to know, does that increase in intensity work for my client? Right. It also allows for gradual adaptation. With the older adult, we want to avoid as much as possible neuromuscular fatigue so that we do not temporarily reduce their ability to perform activities of daily living. When we just progress one variable at a time, it allows for more gradual adaptation of the body in order to avoid that neuromuscular fatigue. It also allows you control on progress. Now, I don't mean that as you are stopping the progress. What I mean is that you are able to control how quickly the progress grows because you're only changing one thing at a time. You see how well they adapt to that, and now I know how quickly or how slowly I need to progress again. It prioritizes safety. It supports long-term progress in our client as well. And then it builds that confidence, which is really important for mastery. All right. We also need to monitor response and recovery rates. So things that we're watching for that indicates that the progression may not have been exactly what they needed is we're looking for excessive fatigue. We're looking for joint discomfort or pain. Now, keep in mind, delayed onset of muscle soreness is to be expected when we do something new or unaccustomed or a higher intensity. But joint pain or joint discomfort, either during the exercise or following the exercise session, is something to be very cognizant of and to make adjustments based upon that. If your client is exhibiting poor recovery, so they're fatigued, they're maybe a little grumpy, their motivation isn't there, that might indicate that the progression was too great. If you see any changes in movement patterns, so they were able to do a lunge really well, and all of a sudden that lunge, that movement quality of the lunge is not where it should be, that might tell you that they're not recovering from that progression and we need to make adjustments. So what do? Easiest thing is to reduce the intensity. Take load off the bar, back off on the depth of a stretch, or reduce the complexity of the move. Reduce everything back down, make sure they can master it, and then you can progress again. You may need to allow more recovery time. Everybody recovers differently. Your client might need more recovery time. Regress or modify if necessary. And a lot of times clients hate to do this because they feel as though it's a failure. Let them know it's not a failure. It is just smart training. And then communicate openly. I'm going to come back to the communication issue in just 1 second because I want to talk about how we individualize the progressions before I talk about communication. So when we are doing a progression, it is not a one-size-fits-all. We can't use a standardized progression model. We have to consider our individual clients and what factors are going to influence them. So your client goals, what is it that they're trying to reach? If it's strength, I'm going to progress strength more than I'm going to progress mobility. What are their current levels of ability or fitness level? So if they are beginners, they are more likely to need smaller and slower progressions, whereas somebody who is more experienced may be able to take more frequent or more complex progressions. Always take into account the client's medical history and their injuries because it will influence how they progress. Their movement quality. So with this one, again, we want to make sure that they're mastering their movement quality prior to their progression. Recovery capacity, remember, two clients may do the same exact exercise, but one might take longer to recover than the other. Their motivation and their confidence. So, how are they feeling? Are they ready to move on? Some clients are, feel a progression is really empowering to them, where other clients might be intimidated. All right. Now let's come back to communication. Why does communication matter? Well, it definitely helps to uncover hidden discomforts. A lot of times when a client is new, or maybe it's their personality and where they want to impress you, they will not tell you when they are not comfortable with an exercise. So we have to openly communicate with them to allow them to let us know how they are actually feeling. It also helps us to monitor recovery and readiness to progress. So are they tired, or are they raring to go? That communication allows us to monitor that. It also helps to identify emotional or mental barriers that the client may be experiencing. They may not feel as though they are ready to progress to another level. Or so when we talk with a client about that barrier, then it allows us to offer the support to our clients on their ability to move forward. All right, and then it also builds in buy-in and accountability. When your client feels as though they are a part of the process on their fitness journey, the long-term commitment becomes much stronger. Okay, so how do we keep the dialogue flowing with our clients? One is asking open-ended questions. So instead of saying, "Are you okay?" maybe ask them, "How did this session feel compared to last session?" Okay. We want to check in before, during, and after our sessions. We check in before, we see where they are at emotionally and physically, and maybe if they've had a really stressful day, the progression that I've planned, I'm going to put it on the back burner because they are not quite ready for it psychologically to move forward. And then during, I'm going to check in with them. How are they feeling at that particular moment? And then after the session, a day or so afterwards, I'm going to check in with them to make sure to see, are they experiencing any symptoms of muscle, exercise-induced muscle damage. You can use simple feedback tools. So a rate of perceived exertion. Give me a number 1 to 10, what you're feeling right now. Or maybe using a recovery checklist in order to see how well they're recovering. Or if you have clients who like to journal, asking them to keep an exercise journal of their feelings of the exercise session during and afterwards. And then, of course, create a judgment-free zone in which the client feels as though they have the ability to communicate with you, to tell you how they are feeling. All right, let's recap what we've learned in this first hour. So with longevity-focused training, the goal is to have strategies to maintain function, mobility, and health for our clients. How do we do that? We train for function. We train for the activities of daily living. We prioritize their movement quality over progression. Remember the power training. We got to add that in because it is so integral to training for function for the activities of daily living. Make sure you're customizing for your individual client, taking into account their goals, taking into account their health history, taking into account their recovery patterns. So we need to integrate recovery and mobility into our training program. And then, of course, we want to make sure that our clients are engaging with the program, they're enjoying the program, because the best written exercise program plan, it's not worth anything if they don't show up because they're not enjoying it. All right. These are my resources that you can take a look at for this presentation. And I also want to leave you with my contact information, which you can reach me through my website at garagegirlsfit.com. And I want to thank you for joining me for part 1. And Araceli is going to come back in and give us some more information.
Thank you, Jan. And again, just some quick reminders for today that you are watching for free, as this first hour serves as an educational free webinar. This course will be part of a 2-hour course that will be available on June 25th, and you will receive a recording of the first hour. However, to earn those 0.2 CECs, you will need to purchase the course and pass the 10-question quiz to get those CECs in your MyAce account. So again, I got a couple of those questions, and quickly we'll be jumping into some questions for today. Before we do that, if you enjoyed today's session and today's topic, just a reminder that we do have some already readily available courses for you to continue your education. This 2-hour course, when it becomes available, will be part of the professional conduct and ethics, as well as the CEC Power Pass if you need those professional conduct and ethics continuing education units, or if you're a member of the CEC Power Pass. All right, without further ado, here are some questions that we received throughout today's session. So thank you again, Jan. Always lovely to have you here in the studio and educating our professionals. So I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Araceli.
Just some quick questions around creatine. So we just had the summit a couple of I would say 2 weeks ago, a couple of days ago, and we had a question about creatine. Rachel Pajadnik, Dr. Rachel Pajadnik talks about creatine, but any other insights that you have as safe for muscle recovery in aging populations, since it's so talked about right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, that question is really outside of my scope, because my scope is not nutrition. So I would really defer to the experts in that area. Again, it's just, I wish I could answer the question for you with confidence, but
yeah.
I'm sorry.
And that's why we have different experts for different topics. So again, Dr. Rachel Pajadnik, session 4 in the Nutrition Summit, she dives deep into creatine as either if it's safe for aging clients for recovery, which I can tell you, yes it is. For active agers, is there difficulty in recovery is that due to the lack of nutritional value that some of those active agers might experience?
It can be,
okay,
for sure, because with recovery, it's not just one factor. It is multiple factors. So nutrition becomes a really big thing, because as we grow older, our body doesn't assimilate the nutrients as well as it did when we were younger.
Right.
But it also is dependent upon their sleep. And we know that older adults have issues with sleep. It can be due to stress. Being an older adult can be a very stressful time period with, dealing with chronic illnesses of maybe them or their loved ones even. So it's not just one factor, but nutrition, absolutely.
Right, with recovery, and that's could be for active agers, for older adult populations, but also just for the general population. It seems to kind of really affect everyone. So as we know, as we work with the older populations, they tend to have some more chronic illnesses or conditions. Any insights for active clients or active aging clients who likely have arthritis and inflammation as a result when it comes to some recovery methods? And then there's a part 2 to that, but I'll let you answer the first one.
With arthritis, one, it depends on the type of arthritis they have, because there's over 100 different types of arthritis.
Okay.
But the most common type of arthritis would be the osteoarthritis. And so that, when we talked about the joint discomfort and pain issue, that is really where you need to pay attention for your client who has arthritis. That if they are experiencing pain or discomfort during the exercise or even after the exercise session, they're going to need more recovery. And it is actually better to use an active recovery as opposed to rest.
Okay. And that was the second part of if there's any risk of increasing the symptoms with movement.
With movement, if they are in a flare-up or they're in that pain, we want to keep it very gentle, no intensity, but just moving through, like dynamic range of motion,
Right.
mobility type
Yeah,
training.
so going back to that pillar of mobility
Yep.
rather than the strength, and definitely not the power.
Exactly,
So,
definitely not the power.
Got it. Got it. So thank you. And this one is around the changing variables section that you talked about. So we talked about changing the frequency, the reps, the sets, some of the more low-hanging fruit and the ones that we're more accustomed to. Someone asked if changing the order of the exercises, would that support any of the outcomes? Can you think of any examples for that?
Yes. So with that, the reason why I'm hesitating is because we go into changing the order of activity or focuses as a way to do progression, and we're going to
Right.
talk about that in our second hour.
Perfect.
But in general, yes, that can be a progression. Absolutely can be a progression, changing the order or the focus of the exercise session.
Right, yeah, so where you probably started with a seated squat, now you're going right into a full body squat with no assistance. So beautiful. And any last resources for our pros, anything that you didn't get to share today before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to really reiterate that age is a factor in this process, but it's really not the limitation. And I always want to talk with my clients about age is just a number. And so with training longevity-focused programs, it's a little different than younger adults, but it's not that much different. So I'm excited for our next hour.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us for today's session. Like Jan said, there is a second hour that will be part of the course, and I appreciate all of you being here. Just some quick housekeeping before we leave, some quick reminders. Here are the resources available to you as ACE professionals. You can find all of these in your My ACE account, as well as a reminder for the $50 gift card for the Refer a Friend program. And last but not least, I would like for you to go into the continuing education section of the ACE website for our free upcoming live webinar happening on Wednesday, July 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And that's the fact versus fiction, cutting through health and fitness myths. This will be a panel hosted by yours truly, and can't wait to have you join us. Stay connected with us, and let's get people moving.